Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Warkana. In today's video record, I'm going to talk about how to build, assessments in OpenEDX Studios. Actually, in first video record, I have explained about how we design course content in OpenEDX Studios. Especially, we have seen about the difference between section, subsection, and units. When we say section, it is a major topic. Subsection, it is like a subtopic, and then unit is like the lower portions of that course content that explain about the thing that we want to explain in detail. Of course, when we come to unit levels, we have also a components, and we use actually we explain unit by using those components. We have different type of component. In our previous sessions, we have seen about like text component. Specifically, from the text component, there are three commonly used categories or parts. The first one is text part, and the next one is iframe part or categories, and the third one is raw HTML parts. And we have seen about those things in the first video record. In today's video record, I'm going to show you the other component in that in that part. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the components that we use commonly to develop assessments. We have different type of assessment. Of course, some of them are open response assessment. When we say it's open response assessment, is a kind of like essay type, or explain about something in the text form. So commonly we call it essay type questions or assessment, or for example some calculation things, and those things are actually open response assessment. So we need to explain about about that things in details, and then the facilitator or the instructor should read and grade it, because they are open response assessment. So I'm going to show you how we can design open response assessment in OpenEDX Studio version. Not only those open response assessment, we'll also see the close-ended question. We commonly call them like close-ended question, or object, like a kind of objective type of question, like multiple type of question, true false type of question, fill in the blank type of question by just using one words, or like drop down type of question, matching type of question, those things. So I am going to talk about those things in my today's video record as well. So let me start, recording these things by sharing my PowerPoint or my PPT. So as I told you, I'm working and I'm teaching at Ethiopia Civil Service University. This is the second video record on how to build courses in OpenEDX Studio versions. So today I'm going to talk about these four things. Content of my presentations include open response assessment, how we actually design or develop open response assessment in the studio version of this OpenEDX. Then I will talk about the common problem type. When we say the common problem type, that is close-ended questions. When we say close-ended question, like multiple type of questions, true false type of question, fill in the blank type of question, and those questions are called actually common problem type here. And the other one is I will talk also about advanced type of the problem components. Under the problem components, there are advanced type, like for example, image building things like drop and drag and drop type of assessments. In face-to-face class, like for example, we cannot use that say type of drag and drop assessment approaches. Of course, we can maybe we can use it like matching type of things, but it's very hard to use drop and drag, isn't it? But technically, at least we learn some technological aspects. So this is one of the beauty of teaching online or using a learning management system to deliver courses. And thanks to OpenEDX learning management system, we are going to experience these things as well. Then I will talk about additional components. In OpenEDX Studio versions, there are some additional component or additional resource component so that we can also give some additional resource for our students, for example, textbook, handout, notes, calculators, and there are a lot of features that's considered categorized under the additional component. So I am going to talk about that additional component in my video record as well. So let me start. Open response assessment, I think, conceptually, well, it's not very hard for us, to know what open response assessment is. Of course, open response assessments are designed specifically for long answer or essay and other text or mathematics-based response that must be written in the long form and require manual grading. The facilitator or the instructor of that specific course should grade it manually because that is open response assessment. More or less, the answer is also different. Even if the answer is correct somehow, maybe the response is different from person to person, and he needs to seriously read through that answer, and the instructor, he or she need to respond or grade that specific assessment, right? That is open response assessment. It is a kind of essay type of question or long answer type of question or mathematical type of question, and in that cases we need to use open response assessment configurations in a stereo version of OpenEDX. So the interface allows students to either type or paste their answer into the text box or upload file. Of course, we have two ways or option to answer for open response assessment. One, we can directly text in the interface. What we call that thing, like what you see is what you get. What you get, of course, that box. We have that boxes, and then we can write our answer directly in that boxes. That is one option. The other option is we can do these things, in the other places, like in Microsoft Word document or somewhere, even on the paper, and then we can scan it and then we can upload it. And we have two options to respond for that open response assessment. So now let's see the step. A step to configure or a step to develop open response assessment. The first one is decide if the assessment or the grading will be done by the students themselves, or that is self-assessment, peers, that is peer assessment, staff, that is staff assessment, or any combination of these assessors. So we need to decide for that specific open response assessment what type of assessment that we are going to use. Is it like self-assessment? Is it like peer assessment? Is it like instructor assessment, or a combination of those type of assessments? So we need to decide first about these things. Then the next step is we need to write a prompt that explain what the student should write or how to complete the assessment properly. That is also very important. We need to write the prompt, the instruction, right? Maybe we can call that thing the question. What is the question, right? What explain about something, whatever it is, right? That is the question. That is the prompt. That is the instruction. And then we need to write or create a rubric that show how you will grade their submission. Rubric is also very important, right? Especially this one is very essential. Before actually you submit, you share or you publish your assessment, you need to set the criteria of grading. That is that is what we call it, transparency of grading transparency. That is very essential. In face-to-face class, most of the times we don't have that option, right? We can't share the criteria unless it is a kind of assignment for open response assessment or exam. Specifically, it's a type of exam. Of course, we can set on our paper, the criteria for grading, but the students, they don't have that information. But here in the online learning and the teaching approach, we need to have a rubric in advance before we publish our open response assessment, and even we need to share that things with our students so that they can read through that criteria, that rubric, and they may give more like maybe they give more attention, more weight, depending on that rubric. That it is a kind of hint for students to give more attention or not, right? So rubric sharing rubric is very important, especially in terms of promoting transparency in grading. That is very essential. So we need to set that thing, as well as we need to set due dates. Then we need to set the deadline for submitting that open response assessment. That's also very essential. And we need to do that thing. These are the 4 steps that we need to follow when we set or configure open response assessment in the stereo version of what we call it OpenEDX. So now this is a new, add a new component or a component part. And now, we always, of course, when we want to explain about something, we need to start from those things, right? Those things are very important in terms of adding content for the course that we are teaching. It may be the content may be in the form of the explanation, or in the form of text, in the form of graph, or in the form of like assessment, wherever, whatever it is. We need to use this component. These components are so essential, and we need to know how to use them. Like, for example, at what time we need to use advanced, at what time we need to use library content, at what time we need to use texts, and for what reason that we need to use open response, problems, video, and drag and drops. We'll see them, step by step through the courses, or through this training, from video record 1, video record 2, and in that video record 3, I'm going to talk about those things in one way or another. Now, in order to add open response assessment, the first thing we need to do is we need to click here, open response, and then this window, this pop-up window will come, and then we need to decide what type of assessment. Is it peer assessment only? Is it self-assessment only? Is it self-assessment to peer assessment? Or is it self-assessment to staff assessment? What type of assessment that we are going to use? So we need to decide these things. So we are going to click on one of those options we have here. Then the next thing is, like, we need to click on edit. You see here, we need to click on edit, and when we click on edit, this window will come, and here it says the prompt. So we are going to write the instructions for that open response assessment. Here it says, here is prompt, here is rubric, and here is the schedule, and here is assessment steps. So we need to click each of this button and see, set or configure something. Now let's see this thing in practice. So let me open one of my cards. Yeah, that one is, I think it's better. I just prefer to explain about these things by showing you like one of the open response assessment that I set for my course specifically. So that is, I believe that one is better, or also easy to understand. As usual, make sure that you are opening your own university's microlink. That's also very essential. I'm just opening it. Here we go. So this is one of the courses that we designed in online format. So we have delivered it already. So I'm going to share you one of the open response assessment that I've designed. So you need to click on go to studios. Don't forget these steps. I think from the first video record you learn about these things. All right, so let me continue. So this is one of the course that actually this is, yeah, it is the code that we have designed. So in order to go to the open response assessment, I have one open response assessment around here. So more probably I will get it here. So this is one of the open response assessment that I have designed for my course. This is instruction based on the provided cross tabulations of gender and employment categories. What trends do you observe in the distribution of male and female across the clerical, custodial, and managerial positions? So this is a kind of prompt. You see, use specific data point from the table to support your analysis. We have these cross tabulation tables. Then so I want to see, the trend and the content wise and the the trends, like how many of them are, for example, from female category, how many of them are clericals, how many of them are custodial, and how many of them are managerials. And from male categories, how many of them are, clericals, custodials, and the manager. So this is employment category and this is gender. So I want to get that explanation, trend as well as content wise. So that is the question. And now let's show you. So we have these things. Actually, to get these things, as usual, you need to click on what? Open response. Once you click on open response, you need to click on edit. You see? Now, when you click on edit button, you see the prompt is here. You need to click the prompt, and so you need to write the instruction here. And even you can insert the picture. This is a picture or image, so you can use this button. I think I have explained about how we can insert image in OpenEDX Studio in my previous video record, so you can revise that one. So by clicking on this button, you can insert a type of image. The prompt is here. And then now let's show you, the prompt means it is the instruction or the question for that open response assessment. Then now let's show you the rubric. I have two rubric for these questions. One is I want to see, the trend of that job categories across gender, right? So I want to know the name of the trend or the name of the criteria for that rubric is trend identification. And the criteria prompt, it is trend identification. Of course, you can give, like different name if you want, or you can even give the same name if you want this. Then, grading. You see here, graded here, or option point, and then there is some options here. For example, for me, it is unsatisfactory if no trend identified. For trend identification, I will give that person, I know in principles, you can't give 0 for a student, right? Of course, you need to give, but, using that principle, maybe I give him 0 if there is no trend. If he explains something, but no, like not to the point, or no trend identification, you talk about something else, and then I will give him 1. And the other one is need improvement, like unsatisfactory. The second category is need improvement. I will give him 2. The criteria is vague trend identification. There is trend, but it is too like not clear. It is so vague. So that is, I will give him 2. The other one is satisfactory. I will give him 3 if he does these things. Identify some trends. If he explains some trends, but I'm not still satisfied, and I will give him 3. And the other one is, it is proficient, it's good, it is excellent, I will give him 5. If he identify most trends, if he do as I did or as I expect, then I will give him 5 points. And if he identify most trends. The other one is like exemplary. Even I have another options, I call it exemplary. And I will give, I need to make this one 7. Actually, it was 7 like this. So in order to write number here, you can write like this 7 and save it. Maybe it's already published. Yeah, let me see the change. Yeah. Yeah, 7 is already now saved. So it is exemplary if he clearly identify all trends. So this is the criteria. So you need to say this criteria, and the student will see even before they submit their grade, and they know how they will be evaluated. Even they can do by themselves for that matter. That's why we call it self-assessment. You can give a criteria, you can give a rubric for your student, and then your student can do self-assessment based on your criteria. And so that is how we set a rubric for one of the criteria or one of my rubric. I can have two rubric or two criteria for answering that specific question. And the other one is the schedules. You need to click on the schedule and you need to set a schedule as well here, 2025, maybe 6. Yeah, you need to set the schedule as well in advance, due date of submitting that specific assignment. And the other one is, of course, it is assessment steps. That's also very important. And here you need to mention whether that specific open response assessment actually evaluated by peer assessment or self-assessment or staff assessment. You need to say the criteria here is learner trainings. This one is a kind of, if you want to add learner training, for example, for peer assessment and self-assessment, you need to put all these things, learner training, so that learner training is used to help students practice grading a simulated peer submission in order to train them on the rubric and ensure learner actually understand the rubric for either self or peer assessment steps. Yeah, even before they go to the real assessment, you need to give some practice questions so that they can practice it. By putting this thing on, if you tick this one, then you give an option for your learner to have some chance, opportunity to do some practice or to do some things over there. So that is one thing. Even you can click on setting and you can, like for example, display name final reflection on practicing spaces. You can give a name for your open response assessment, right? For example, you remember in masterclass we have final reflection 1, final reflection 2. Actually the name of that assessment actually the name of that assessment set here. You can set the name of that assessment here. And the text response is required. You can set these things, text response if you want. Response editor, simple text editors. You can file upload response. For example, if you want your students can upload, the answer, not only texting. If you want to give an option for them to upload, then you can click here and then you can make optional, or if you want it's mandatory, you can make it required. So you can set the option to upload document in that ways. So this is one thing. So you can set, you can click on setting and you can set these things over here. So you can read over, down here, and then you can set, for example, what type of file they can upload. Is it a kind of PDF file? Is it a kind of image file? You need to set these things as well. So you have the option to do that. Now, maybe let's show you this thing in practice. That is in example forms. So maybe, if you want to see practically, to make it very practical or to make it very simple, what you do is that, first of all, you need to be on the studio version. So you see, this is practice open edX tool. So this is the page or the course content or course share that we are using to practice for this specific session, right? So make sure that you are in the studio versions. One, the other one is, in order to get those additional components, you need to be on the unit pages, not on the section page, not in the course outline page, or not in other places. Unless you are on the unit page, you can see those components. Make sure that you are there. So let's go to one of the unit we have here. Of course, I think you know how to add unit at this point because I have explained these things in my first video record. So we have this additional component, add new component. So you can click open response here. Then you can select, for example, self-assessment, peer assessment. Of course, you can select from here. Even in the other, there is one button that say step of assessment. Over there, you can also set whether that specific open response assessment is self-assessment or peer assessment or staff assessment. You can say that thing goes over there or here. Let's make it self-assessment or staff. Let's make it self-assessment here. So this is, of course, there are some sample over here, right? You need to delete them, or you need to replace by your own prompts and those things over here. So you need to click edit. You see, in order to edit your response, you need to click on edit. Edit is here. Then from edit, you need to click on prompt, and then from prompt, what you do in the prompt is you need to write the instructions. So you need to delete what is already there, and then you need to write the instruction or the prompt for your open response assessment. That is the basic one. The next button is rubric. You need to click on the rubric. There is sample over here already, so that you can replace by your own. And if you want to add more rubric, or if you want to delete, I will show you how you can do that thing. If you want to add, at the bottom there is an option that says add rubric. You see, add criteria. Add criteria. What if I want to delete it? Because there are many in number, and I just want to have 3 or 4 of them. The option is over here. You see, you can delete this rubric. You can make it if you want 0, like empty. Like, just it is about click on remove button over here. Yeah. So there is no option or criteria option. Just click on add criteria, and then you need to give the criteria name, then criteria prompt, and then you need to add the criteria, like feedback for this criteria here. Like, for example, feedback. Yeah, you can give a feedback as well. For example, let's say trend, for example, let's say trend here, and then criteria prompt is also trend, right? Let me see that. And then we can click on options. Then you see here the grade is here, so you need to write maybe like good, the good, very good, and excellent. Like, you want to give these ranks for your students. Then let's see, that is good. I call it good. So the option name is good, and the point that I will give for my student, if he actually do like good, I can give it 0.5. Then you can say 0.5. Then optional explanation. You need to give the criteria that you give him good if he do what, if he explain it very well, right? Like, if he explain it somewhat good, you can say whatever it is, right? Depending on the criteria that you said at the beginning. That's so very important. So you can write these things, and then you need to add options, so that if you have like 3 or 4 options, for example, good, very good, and then excellent, right? Then at what is the criteria to say it is good? What is the criteria? So you are going to write here the criteria here, the point is here. What is the criteria to say it is very good? You need to write the criteria here and the point here. And what is the criteria to say it is excellent? You need to write the criteria here and the grade here. And then if you want like another criteria, or another, like this one is one criteria, right? Another criteria, you can click on add criteria. This one is like grading level. Add option, you can call it a grading level, like good, very good, and excellent. But if you have another grading criteria, like for example, in my example, I have 2 grading criteria. One is, it is a kind of trend identification. The other is a kind of content identification. In content wise, like content in say, I want to get the real values. How many of them are female in the custodial? How many of them are male? Those number in percent, for example, in number, numerically, amount, that number, then percent, and then how many of them are, the managers. So I want to get that number, so that then I want to see the trend, then the trends in which job category that's we get many females, in which job category that we get many males, and in which job category male dominates, and in which job category female dominates. That is what we call it trends, and how the thing is going on, right? So you can say that things as well. So this is how we add open response assessment. I hope at this time you get how to do that things. Now here, let me explain some concept about open response assessment using this PowerPoint. Self-assessment. This one is self-assessment, so that students, they are going to assess themselves, evaluate themselves. The other one is peer assessment. So now you are going to give an option for your friends, for another student to evaluate, another student. So that is peer assessment, right? You can choose to have a learners, students do peer assessment on each other's response as part of open response assessment. That is very interesting. We need to practice these things, right? It is very interesting because on one way, they get the chance to get familiar with that things, and in the other ways, even they get the chance to read their peers, response, right? So, practicing say type of assessment is very nice, but you need to say these things: must grade, graded by, and enable flexible peer grading average. What is that? Must grade. That means how many will each peer need to assess. You need to say it. How many each student, how many assessment that each student needs to assess. Is it 2 persons assessment or is it 3 persons? The response that one person assess, how many will each peer need to assess? That is must grade. You must grade 3 assessment or response or 4 response or 5 response of your peers, so that you need to say this thing must grade. The other one is graded by. Here, how many peers will each response need to be graded? Like for example, one response may be graded by 5 students. You see, one response, one answer can be graded by. You can say these things. You need to say that things from 1 to 99. You can use one of the number from 1 to 99. So you can write that things. So you need to state how many students evaluate or make assessment for one given response. That's what we call it, graded by. The number of students or the number of peers will each response needs to be graded. And then another one is enable flexible